Hello and welcome to the Dice Tower. I'm Wendy Yi, and today I want to talk about Slay the Spire. And specifically, I want to talk about what I did because I messed up my miniatures. I had just a little bit left in my Topcoat can and I didn't think that it was coming out. And so I oversprayed my miniatures and they got all frosty. So basically, the spray went on extra thick. And even though it's a clear spray, as you build up clear stuff, it just turns grayish, whitish color. And so it washed out my miniatures quite terribly. So let's go ahead and get started and I'll tell you what I tried to do to fix it. First off, I want to start with the little golden guy that I have over here. So honestly, whenever I do metallics, I do like to come in later and actually place the metallic over the top of the matte top coat because it tends to get rid of all the cool metallic shine of the miniatures anyways. So, and I like shiny stuff. So I was like, well, I'll come back in anyways and I'll redo his helmet and his sword and his armor and all that kind of stuff. So I started with that because I figured that would point me in a right direction. And then when I placed the wash, the little brown wash that I put over all that gold so that like his eye slits and stuff could have a little darkness and it just feels a little bit more tinged, I went ahead and I added that to the rest of his body too, because one side of him was definitely more white than the other side. So I do feel like that went ahead and that evened him out a little bit, adding that wash, and it made those browns pop and them come back. So that seemed to work out for that one. Next, I moved on to this yellow robot looking guy, and he honestly had a bad base coat in the first place. And so adding in that worst top coat, he just looked terrible. He was a mess. So I went back in and I used a yellow contrast. Now it's kind of a misnomer because it is in the contrast line, but unlike the other contrast paints, it doesn't really have a high and a low version of the color. It's just the same yellow across the board. So it doesn't matter if I place it on a miniature, it's not going to have like a darker yellow and a lighter yellow. It's just the same color across. So I went ahead and I used that and I tried to focus in on the lighter parts of his arm because I had already put kind of an orangish shadow underneath him. And so I just wanted it to make that yellow pop again so he didn't look so gray. And I feel like that lifted how I wanted. In the end, he still just kind of looks a little messy because that base coat was rough. And then he's not as shiny as he was. But I think in the end, it's okay. He'll do. Now, the worst one that was affected of the miniatures was definitely this green guy. And it was just like one whole side of him had just turned gray. And he was the worst. So I grabbed my green wash and I hoped and I prayed that if I put something over the top of it, maybe it would bring out the underneath colors. So my concept behind this, or my thought behind it, was like if you have a scratched up plastic and you buffer it out and you put like a top coat over the top, sometimes it'll make it clear and see-through. I know that's what happens with like acrylic nails, right? You like buff it off and then you put that top coat over the top and everything suddenly looks clear. So this was my hope, was that if I put a wash over the top of his green jacket, it would just bring out the green and maybe make that crystallized top coat a little bit more see-through. And so I went ahead and I put it on, and I do think that it worked out. Just putting it on one side wasn't good because then it only worked shiny on one side and I wanted it to match across. So I went ahead and threw the wash on the whole cloak and I think it turned out okay. So I was happy with the effect and it really did bring out the color that I wanted it to. Last up, I have the pink and blue lady. Now, she already has this frosty effect to her, so I was really tempted to just leave it and say, good enough. But then I didn't want her to not match everybody else. So because I threw washes on everybody else and I made them more vibrant, I went ahead and I added a like pinkish reddish wash and then a blue wash to her to just kind of bring out those particular colors. Initially with her bow, I started with just putting the wash underneath because I thought that the frosted gray actually looked fine on the top highlights of her bow, but then they weren't very blue. And so I was like, you know what, just make it equal across. I don't want some weird parts being shiny and other parts not being shiny. And I'm not going to put another top coat on because for fear that I'll mess it up again. So I went ahead and I just put the wash all over it. And I think that it turned out well. It is a little bit more vibrant than it was. And really, at this point, I even looked back at the golden guy that I did with the wash, and the shiny is not as bad. When you first put on that wash, it is like uber shiny because it's wet. But then coming back to it, it's clearly more shiny than it was with a top coat on. But I think it's okay. It's not like distractingly bright. There's not massive lights reflecting off of it. So in the end, I think I was happy with this. I am really curious though, if anybody else has better suggestions or just different suggestions as to what to do if you put on top coat too heavy. That's just something that I'm always learning, because I think that painting is one of those hobbies that there's always more to learn, there's more to try, there's new techniques. So please share those with me in the comments. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Wendy Yi. This is Painting the Dice Tower, and you all should keep painting minis because it's really awesome.
Hey folks, thanks for joining us for that video. If you haven't yet, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hey, make sure you check out what's happening, where I'll cover an app on an iOS or a Switch device, and you can check it out along with me. Thanks very much. You've been watching The Dice Tower.